everybody. Welcome back into the show. Second half hour of hour number one on this Friday, September 29th, 2023 edition of Your Defending Fathers with Chucker Randy Bishop here on the Patriot Voice Radio Network. Joining us on the line right now is Dr. Sherry O'Donnell. She is an announced candidate for the Republican primary for U.S. Senate in next year's primary election. Good morning, Sherry.
Good morning, Chucker Randy. How are you?
We're doing good. We got a fantastic Friday going and wanted to have you on the show to introduce you to the folks. Let's start off with who is Dr. Sherry O'Donnell?
Well, thank you, Randy. And before we get on that, I just want to say that there was a call out for your station last night when I was in Livonia. So who is Dr. Sherry O'Donnell? I am one of 7 children. And I got an early start because I moved out of my home at age 14 just because of dysfunction. But Randy, I always knew I wanted to be a doctor. And even though I had moved out on my own, I still always had medicine in my foreground and in my sight. So I went to medical school, and then I felt really that I was called to missions before medical school. So as I went to medical school, it was really important to me that I kept missions in the forefront of my mind. So went to college in Hastings, Nebraska. Then I moved to Oklahoma, where I went to Bible school and then medical school. And then I moved to Michigan to join a group that did extensive foreign missions, medical group. I've been to 35 different countries, all on short-term missions. And most primarily, the last probably 15 years has been disaster relief. The past year, I've gone to Ukraine, right after the war broke out, so now it's almost a year and a half or 2 years ago. Sure. I went to Ukraine, I went to Turkey, Lebanon, Syria, kind of after the earthquake in February, and I continue to serve after big-time disaster. I was in New York City after COVID broke out because of my disaster relief experience.
Now, one of the things that you show on your website, and folks listening can go to her website, D-O-C Sherry, SHERRY 2024.com. And I vetted your website. I looked at your key issues. And right at the very top of the list, of course, with this short resume that you just gave us, is medical freedom. Explain medical freedom and why, as a U.S. Senator, you would be so much impactful in Washington, D.C., representing the state of Michigan.
Thank you, Randy. Randy, I am the only one on the ticket right now that has the credentialing of a physician. And as a physician, when I say medical tyranny and medical freedom, over the past couple years since COVID showed its ugly head, we suddenly have been told that we have to take vaccines, that we have to quarantine, that we have to shut down. What Gretchen Whitmer did over the past couple years with COVID in Michigan is absolutely unconscionable. And realizing that up to this point, we've always had a choice, and our choices are being stripped away. The fact that parents are not given freedom to know that their child is struggling with gender dysphoria and that they can do surgeries on a minor without the parents knowing, that is mutilation. That is not medicine. The fact that the left side wants to call out and say that we're not concerned about women's health. I am concerned about women's health. 65% of my patient populace is women. So when I say medical freedom, it's standing up and allowing physicians to be physicians, allowing physicians to prescribe medications that have been safe and effective for 80 some odd years. When COVID came out, after serving in New York City, I understand the disease probably better than most of the physicians, especially early on in our country. And to be told that I couldn't prescribe hydroxychloroquine or I couldn't prescribe ivermectin is a little bit crazy. So medical freedom for physicians to be physicians, treat our patients that is a sacred relationship, and stand up and push back and say, no, what Fauci has done and said is not only egregious, but he's committed 26 felons. And we cannot afford our medical sovereignty to be given over to World Health Organization. And who am I as a physician? What would I do in Senate? I would push back and stand for our medical rights and freedoms.
Now, one of the points on that you just mentioned, and I covered this on my show when the story first broke, is how the Biden administration is participating with the World Health Organization, the WHO, and that there is actually a proposal that they're going to be voting on, if not hadn't already voted on it. I think that needs to be ratified in the form of a treaty in the U.S. Senate, is where they're actually going to give our medical sovereignty over to the World Health Organization. Can you explain, just take a minute and explain that process, what we're dealing with, what you're talking about?
So, Randy, our medical sovereignty as a nation should be determined by us and what we do. What we saw during COVID, and when COVID first broke out, every single morning I was on the CDC, and as a physician, I was able to actually tap into some of the World Health Organization meetings, and you had China at the table, and you had some of the other world leaders, medical leaders, making decisions for the world and how we were going to respond to COVID. The United States was at that table. Well, now suddenly, rather than having a voice, what they're trying to do is say the World Health Organization can tell us how we're going to respond and what we're going to do as an individual nation. That should never have even been considered, because the World Health Organization plus those other entities at the tables do not have our best interest in mind. And Randy, for decades, we have been the world's leader in medical health and our medical system. And after being to 35 different countries, I can tell you our health system stood head and shoulders above any other in the world. And as we give that over to the World Health Organization, our healthcare system will continue to disintegrate. That is a dangerous thing to do. Should never have even been considered.
Absolutely agree with that. Second point on your website is economic prosperity, not inflation. And talk about that particular bullet point and how it relates to you being a business owner, a doctor who owns your own clinic for 23 years. Explain to the folks what you're talking about regarding economic prosperity, not inflation.
Randy, part of that is we have to go back and stop the taxing that's going on. As a small business owner, we are paying an egregious amount of taxes, but we need to look and go back to economy, look at it from a macro and not a micro. We've gone to the situation right now that so many businesses have been closed, especially during COVID. And who is the government to say what is essential and what is not essential? We're paying, when Biden got into office, gas price was $2.08. It's now anywhere from $3.50 to $4.50 in our state. We need to open up the pipeline and become energy independent once again. But the inflation, I have patients, Randy, that are having to consider whether they take and pay their medications or if they put food on the table. So inflation needs to be stopped. We're at a higher inflation rate than we have been for decades, and Biden economics are continuing to destroy our nation. And people need to get food on their table, and they need to know that they're going to be able to afford their bills.
Now, you have proudly signed the No New Tax Pledge that I know personally very well, because I vet all of our candidates up here in northern Michigan, and if they ask for my endorsement personally, that's the first thing I ask them to sign. If you're going to vote to increase taxes, then I'm against you. And if you sign it, and usually I ask to cut their finger and have them sign it in blood, I actually have in my pledge that if they ever vote to increase taxes, that they agree to resign their office within 48 business hours. Within 2 days, they will resign, and they sign it if they want my endorsement. You've signed it for this particular office for U.S. Senate.
Yes, Randy, I did. And Randy, I also ran for congressional race the last term, and I signed it then as well. But yes, I've absolutely signed that.
Now, when you ran in that last race, you actually primary challenged a Republican incumbent congressman, Pastor Tim Walberg.
That's correct, Randy. The redistricting was kind of what put Tim and I in opposition, because initially I was going to go against Fred Upton. That has subsequently resigned. But I initially was not going to primary Tim. But as I took a look at it, I realized that I still had a whole lot more fire in my bones and a whole lot more do than what Tim has done. Pastor Tim and Tim Walberg is a conservative vote, but I wish that he would do a bit more than what he has done. But I've gained a lot of respect for him. But I was not initially intending to primary him. My primary was against Fred Upton.
Yes, and the other bullet point I want to talk about, which was very interesting to me, is you actually hate career politicians, and explain your involvement in the U.S. term limits here in Michigan, the operation that you totally want to implement term limits in Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Randy. Randy, I did serve and am serving as the Michigan State Chair for the organization U.S. Term Limits. Our forefathers never expected career politicians to be in there for 60, 70 years. And sometimes, unfortunately, I think that the White House looks a lot like a nursing home. But by the way, I want to offer my condolences to Senator Feinstein's family as she passed. But when we see that legislators have been in there way too long, people are not, they're tired of the same old, tired of the status quo. And I'm not a career politician. I was asked whether or not I plan on serving as a career politician, and I said, I have served and I've done my career. I'm not interested in that. I'm homegrown and not on again and off again. But when we have legislators that have been in for decades, they grow stale. They move to the puppet strings of legislators and lobbyists rather than we the people. And I think we the people are ready for fresh start, fresh blood. And when we look at every other industry, checks people out, and I mean the aviation industry, they have to test and see about competency and ability. But we need to get in, do the job that we can do, and get back out and let the next fresh blood come in.
Yeah, absolutely. I got a couple of text messages real quick. If you win the nomination and are able to defeat Elisa Slotkin, how many terms do you want to serve?
Randy, I'm the only one that I believe and I know can beat Elisa Slotkin. So I just want to attack that first for just a moment. Elisa Slotkin is a liberal's liberal, and she's gotten 100% with NARL, and she's gotten 0 with the right to life. So number one,
we're gonna hold you right there, Sherry, on that point. We're gonna go to a hard break. So can we pick that up right there when we get back?
Absolutely.
Yes. How will Dr. Sherry O'Donnell defeat the deep state Elisa Slotkin? Short break, a word from our sponsors. We'll be right back. Welcome back into the show. Final segment of hour number one. Staying on through the break is Dr. Sherry O'Donnell. She's a candidate running for the U.S. Senate Republican primary nomination for next year's Republican primary. And we want to get back to that conversation. That point is, what is your plan? How exactly are you going to beat Elisa Slotkin in November of 2024 election?
Randy, can I address the question that was asked right before we took a break, and that was
Sure.
How many terms would I opt
term limits, and then let's get into strategy. Sure.
Yes. So I plan on each term right now is 6 years, and I would serve 2 terms rather. So that by 12 years, if we can't get the job done, then we do need to move out. So what is my plan against Elisa Slotkin? I have the voters backing. I'm grassroots. I am homegrown. I'm not on again, off again, and I'm not moving back to the area to secure a seat. Elisa Slotkin, while she may have an impressive resume, I've got the life experience. I have the blue-collar workers that will get behind me. I have the things that resonate with the voters is who I am and what I am. And they are ready for that fresh start. Even on the left side, you've got some of the moderate Democrats that are saying the left has gone too far, and we need somebody that's going to bring this together and bring common sense back. Common sense is not so common anymore. So I do plan on taking this. I am grassroots. I will get the grassroots. I'm not a recycled politician. And I have the grassroots of the people. Money doesn't vote, voters vote. And I've got the voters behind me.
Well, one other two main points I want to get to, and again, if you go to our website, D-O-C, Sherry, Sherry, 2024.com, click on issues. 2 bullet points real quick. We only have a couple minutes left. Protecting our children and preserving our constitutional rights. I want to talk about the children because Donald Trump at his event got a huge standing ovation when he said, I will protect our children. You have it listed exactly on your website stating exactly that. How do you feel about our public schools, union teachers, indoctrination, all of that? Talk about that for a second.
Randy, that breaks my heart. So I've been standing at the school boards from the onset of COVID and the masking and saying we can't mask our children. They learn by watching facial expression. And then to see what's being taught, the woke ideology, the pornography that's being taught in our local schools is just absolutely unacceptable. The fact that Biden administration at one point called parents wanting to know what their children were learning as domestic terrorists. Where have we gone? I've stood at the school boards. I will continue to. I think we need to dismantle the teachers' union and get back to the academia that makes this nation great. We used to be competitive against China with our academia. That no longer is the case. Instead, what's happening is our academics are dropping and suicide rate is increasing. We need to get back to family being family and supporting the educational system as opposed to the educational system telling the parents what they're going to do. And it's not a matter of demanding FOIAs to understand what the children are being taught. Parents should have full disclosure to them as far as what is being taught.
Now, if you get elected, hate to interrupt, but I want to get this on the record. If you get elected and you go to Washington as a U.S. Senator from the state of Michigan, would you hopefully with a Republican president getting elected next year, would you push, advocate, absolutely talk about eliminating the budget for the Department of Education to put an end to that department that Ronald Reagan actually ran on back in 1980? He said he would abolish the Department of Education, which was, Sherry, a political payback for Jimmy Carter's election in 76. Are you an advocate, and would you advocate for the elimination of the U.S. Department of Education?
Yes, I would, Randy.
Very good. That's all I needed to hear. Lastly, the Constitution. You have that on your website. How is it that you could effectuate the reinforcement of getting back to our U.S. Constitution in Washington?
Our U.S. Constitution was the documents that have made our nation great. And over the past several years, we continue to see our amendments being trampled on, the freedom to gather, the freedom to bear arms. It's crazy. What would I do? I'd remind everybody and fight for our Constitution, all of our amendments, First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment, and so on, because that is the sacred document that has kept this nation the great nation that it is, and we cannot dismantle it like is being done presently.
Well, the thing of it is, and we are going to have Jim Lewis on in the third hour. He's coming up a week from Saturday to do a Constitution boot camp here in Elk Rapids in Antrim County. I'm going to talk to you about it afterwards. But the point is this. So many people don't even know the Constitution. Like you mentioned, our public schools have gotten away from teaching it, I believe, in detail, like how I learned it in, graduating in 1976. But the point is this. People put their hand on a Bible and get sworn in to uphold and defend the U.S. Constitution if it's a state-level office, the state's Constitution. And, Sherry, they don't simply understand that. I'll give you the final 40 seconds here to wrap it up and tell the audience what you want to know about yourself, Dr. Sherry O'Donnell.
Thank you.
Real quick, I'm sorry, the clock jumped on me. Sherry, I'm going to have you back on. Can we do that?
Absolutely. I would love to, Randy.
All right. Thank you for coming on. DocSherry2024.com.
Thank you for listening to your Defending Fathers with Trucker Randy Bishop.